Do not fire unless you are willing to live with what happens next. Admiral Nathan Brooks said it so quietly that the words barely carried across the command deck, yet every officer aboard the Terran Defense Command flagship stopped moving as if the air itself had frozen. No alarms were screaming. No one was panicking. That was what unsettled the young communications officer, Daniel Hayes, the most. Every screen surrounding him displayed the same impossible sight. Hundreds of Dominion warships were advancing in perfect formation, their polished hulls reflecting the pale light of the sun as they crossed the final navigation boundary surrounding the solar system. It was a line every major civilization in the galaxy recognized. Crossing it without permission was not a mistake. It was a message. Around the galaxy, billions of viewers watched the live diplomatic broadcast. News anchors whispered over one another. Military analysts confidently predicted that humanity would issue another formal protest before accepting whatever terms the Dominion demanded. After all, that was what humans always did. They negotiated. They compromised. They avoided wars whenever possible. On the bridge, Brooks stood with his hands resting behind his back, his expression calm enough to belong to a man waiting for a delayed flight, instead of facing the largest alien fleet ever assembled near Earth. His silver hair caught the glow of the holographic displays, while his dark navy uniform remained almost painfully ordinary compared to the elaborate ceremonial armor filling the Dominion flagship visible on the central screen. The transmission connected without delay. Grand Marshal Kalen Dravik appeared surrounded by officers whose uniforms looked more suited for a royal parade than a military operation. A faint smile crossed the marshal's face before he spoke. "Admiral Brooks, I expected someone younger." Brooks answered with the same, even tone. "You expected someone easier to intimidate." Several Dominion officers laughed quietly. Dravik folded his hands behind his back. "Our fleet will proceed to Earth's orbit. Your government will sign a revised security agreement. You will accept Dominion oversight. Everyone goes home peacefully." Brooks looked toward the tactical display instead of answering immediately. Tiny blue icons representing civilian traffic continued moving exactly as scheduled. Cargo ships, passenger shuttles, weather satellites. Ordinary people living ordinary lives only a few million miles behind him. "Grand Marshal," Brooks finally said, "your fleet has crossed the final safety line. Please turn your ships around." Dravik tilted his head with open amusement. "Or what?" Brooks did not raise his voice. "Nothing has happened yet because we are giving you the opportunity to leave." More laughter echoed across the Dominion bridge. One officer leaned toward another and shook his head as though watching an inexperienced rookie bluff during a card game. The marshal smiled wider. "You humans have always confused restraint with leverage." Brooks gave the smallest nod. "Actually, Marshal, your intelligence service made that mistake." The connection remained silent for several long seconds. Somewhere behind Brooks, someone quietly set a coffee mug onto a console. No one looked away from the screen. Dravik stepped closer to his camera. "You have one fleet. We brought 18. Stand down before this becomes embarrassing." Brooks glanced once toward Daniel Hayes. "Confirm civilian evacuation routes remain open." "Yes, sir." "Good." He returned his attention to the Dominion commander. "Marshal, this is the last warning humanity will issue today." Dravik laughed outright. "History will remember this conversation." Brooks answered without the slightest hint of anger. "It will. Just not for the reason you think." As the transmission ended, every officer on the bridge remained perfectly still. No cheers. No speeches. Only the quiet hum of machinery and the soft glow of one console deep inside the command center, changing from blue to amber for the very first time. 3 weeks earlier, the room beneath Lunar Defense Command looked nothing like the nerve center of a civilization preparing for the worst. It looked like a conference room where people had been working too many late nights. Empty coffee cups sat beside stacks of engineering reports. Half-finished sandwiches rested next to classified tablets. Someone had forgotten a baseball cap on the corner of the table. Admiral Nathan Brooks stood near the wall instead of taking the seat at the head of the room. He listened while everyone else argued. Dr. Olivia Carter slid a thick folder across the polished table. "I am saying this one more time," she said, rubbing her tired eyes. Project Sentinel was never designed to become part of our active defense network. It was built as a theoretical deterrent. We still do not understand every variable. General Michael Donovan folded his arms. The Dominion fleet has doubled its border patrols in 6 months. They have tested our response times 14 separate times. At some point, theory becomes reality. Olivia shook her head. You are talking about activating a system that has never been fired outside controlled simulations. Exactly, Donovan replied. Which means nobody knows it exists. Nathan finally walked toward the table. His voice stayed calm enough that everyone immediately stopped talking. Let us keep emotions out of this. Olivia looked directly at him. This is not emotion, Nathan. This is physics. She tapped the folder. Every model reaches the same conclusion. Once the beam reaches full coherence, there is no practical way to reduce its output in real time. We can only aim it. We cannot soften it. Nathan studied the pages without speaking. He had spent almost 30 years making decisions that carried consequences measured in lives instead of numbers. This felt different. The weight did not come from what the system could do. It came from what it might accidentally do. How confident are you? He finally asked. Olivia sighed. Confident enough that I have not slept through the night in almost 4 months. A faint smile crossed Nathan's face. That sounds familiar. A few people around the table laughed quietly, breaking the tension for only a moment. Donovan leaned forward. Admiral, with respect, every intelligence report says the Dominion believes we are bluffing. They think diplomacy is the only tool we have left. Nathan nodded slowly. Because diplomacy has worked. Donovan answered without hesitation. Until it does not. Silence settled over the room again. Nathan walked toward the large observation window overlooking the lunar construction yards. Massive civilian cargo ships drifted peacefully between orbital stations while maintenance crews moved from dock to dock. Nothing about the scene suggested fear. Families lived up here. Children attended school on rotating habitats. Mechanics complained about overtime. Restaurant owners worried about customers. Ordinary life continued because people trusted someone else to think about impossible decisions. Nathan rested one hand against the glass. My father used to tell me something before every Little League game, he said quietly. He would say that the strongest player is the one who never starts the fight. Donovan smiled. And if somebody else starts it? Nathan looked back toward the table. Then you finish it as quickly as possible and spend the rest of your life wishing it had never happened. Olivia closed her folder. So what happens now? Nathan answered after several long seconds. We keep Sentinel locked. We improve every safeguard. We pray nobody ever gives us a reason to unlock it. No one noticed that, outside the station, a long-range surveillance satellite quietly detected 18 Dominion task groups changing course toward the solar system. The Dominion flagship continued its slow advance, never changing course by a single degree. Inside its immense command chamber, Grand Marshal Kalen Dravik watched the latest tactical projections scroll across the main display with complete confidence. Blue icons marked every known Terran defense platform. Red lines traced the Dominion fleet's path toward Earth. According to every simulation generated by Dominion intelligence, humanity had only 2 realistic choices. They could surrender peacefully or make a symbolic military gesture before accepting negotiations. Neither option concerned him. Distance to the final orbital approach. Dravik asked. 312,000 miles, Grand Marshal, replied Commander Sorenvale. No significant movement from the Terran fleet. Dravik smiled faintly. Exactly as predicted. Around the command deck, officers quietly exchanged satisfied looks. Humanity had earned a reputation for patience across the galaxy. They signed treaties. They respected borders. They argued inside council chambers instead of settling disputes through overwhelming force. To the Dominion, those qualities looked less like wisdom and more like hesitation. Soren tapped another report onto the central display. Our diplomatic observers report no evacuation of major Earth population centers. Commercial traffic remains active. Stock markets are stable. Civilian entertainment broadcasts continue as scheduled. Interesting, Dravik said. They are trying very hard to appear calm. One younger officer laughed. Perhaps they actually believe another speech will solve this. More quiet laughter spread through the bridge. Dravik did not join them. He respected patterns, and patterns mattered. Humanity had followed the same pattern for decades. Every confrontation began with restraint. Every disagreement ended with compromise. Why would today be different? Hundreds of light years away, Inside the Galactic Council chamber, representatives from dozens of civilizations watched the same live tactical feed. Some whispered nervously, while others appeared almost bored. Counselor Celine Marr, one of the few delegates who had spent significant time on Earth, leaned toward the council chair. This is becoming dangerous. The chairman barely looked up. For whom? For everyone if somebody misreads the situation. He dismissed the concern with a wave of his hand. Humanity has never initiated an interstellar war. Celine answered quietly, no. They have simply survived everyone forced upon them. Her warning disappeared beneath the room's growing conversation. Several delegates openly debated how long it would take Earth to accept Dominion oversight. Others discussed trade opportunities once the crisis ended. To them, the outcome already seemed settled. Back aboard the Terran flagship, Daniel Hayes removed his headset for a moment and rubbed his temples. The communication channels had become strangely quiet. No threats, no shouting, just routine status updates delivered with almost unsettling professionalism. He looked toward Admiral Brooks. Sir, they are still advancing at the same speed. Nathan nodded once. Any response to our transmission? None. Brooks glanced toward the navigation display. Send another message. Daniel hesitated. The same one. The same one. Moments later, the transmission crossed the empty space between the fleets. It contained only 11 words. Please alter course immediately. You are entering a restricted defensive zone. No dramatic language. No insults. No countdown. Just a simple request. On the Dominion bridge, Commander Soren read the message aloud before looking toward Dravik. Should I respond? Dravik slowly shook his head. No. Silence is often more persuasive than an argument. The transmission expired unanswered. Nathan listened as Daniel confirmed there had been no reply. He folded his hands behind his back and stared through the forward observation window at the distant formation of Dominion warships. Olivia Carter quietly stepped beside him. Do you think they even read it? Nathan gave the smallest smile. Oh, they read every word. Then why keep sending the same message? Nathan continued watching the distant fleet. Because someday, someone will ask whether we gave them every chance to turn around. Across the bridge, the amber indicator beneath the Sentinel control console continued glowing steadily, unnoticed by the Dominion, ignored by the Council, and silently waiting for a decision that nobody aboard the Terran flagship wanted to make. The private channel opened without ceremony. No dramatic music. No countdown. Just two faces appearing across an encrypted connection separated by thousands of miles of empty space. Grand Marshal Kalen Dravik settled comfortably into his chair. Admiral Nathan Brooks remained standing with both hands loosely behind his back. For several seconds, neither man spoke. Dravik finally broke the silence. I appreciate that you requested a direct conversation instead of another public speech. That tells me you understand the situation. Nathan answered calmly. I requested this because I wanted to remove politics from what happens next. Politics? Dravik smiled. This is simple mathematics. 18 fleets against 1. Nathan glanced toward an off-screen display before returning his attention to the Marshal. Numbers have their place. So does judgment. Dravik leaned forward. Then use yours. Order your ships to stand aside. Dominion Security Administration will be temporary. Earth will retain local governance. Your people will continue their daily lives with very few changes. Nathan let the proposal hang in the air before replying. There is one problem. Only one. You are asking us to surrender our future because you believe we are afraid to defend it. Dravik folded his arms. Are you saying that is incorrect? Nathan nodded once. Yes. The Marshal laughed softly. Then prove me wrong. On the Terran bridge, nobody moved. Daniel Hayes kept his eyes fixed on the transmission, while Olivia Carter quietly watched the engineering data flowing across a secondary monitor. Deep below the deck, technicians continued preparing systems that had remained dormant for years. Every checklist required 2 independent confirmations. Every authorization demanded another review. Nobody hurried. Nathan had insisted that if the day ever came, they would not allow fear to make decisions for them. Dravik spoke again. Your warnings have become repetitive, Admiral. That is because the facts have not changed. Neither has my course. Nathan gave a small nod. I know. The Marshal smiled confidently. Then we understand one another. Nathan looked directly into the camera. Not yet. He reached toward a console and activated a three-dimensional navigation map, visible to both sides. A glowing red line marked the Dominion formation. A thin blue circle surrounded the solar system. You crossed this boundary 19 minutes ago. International navigation law recognizes it as a restricted defense perimeter. Dravik barely glanced at the display. Your laws do not apply to us. No, Nathan agreed. But consequences usually do. Several Dominion officers quietly chuckled in the background. One whispered something that caused another to grin. They had expected another diplomatic lecture. Instead, they found themselves listening to what sounded like a patient instructor explaining traffic regulations. Dravik almost looked disappointed. I expected more from the legendary Terran Navy. Nathan answered without changing expression. You still might. The marshal's smile slowly faded. Is that a threat? No. Nathan shook his head. A warning. He paused just long enough for every translator in the galaxy to finish processing his words. Marshal, I am asking you one final time. Turn your fleet around. Continue forward, and I will authorize a defensive demonstration. Dravik raised an eyebrow. A demonstration? One controlled discharge directed away from your ships. Laughter spread openly across the Dominion bridge now. One officer actually applauded. Another shook his head with obvious amusement. Dravik waited for the laughter to fade before speaking again. Very well, Admiral. Show the galaxy your demonstration. Nathan did not react to the mockery. I sincerely hope I do not have to. Without another word, he reached forward and ended the transmission himself. The main screen went dark. No applause echoed across the Terran bridge. Olivia slowly exhaled. He thinks we are bluffing. Nathan looked toward the amber light glowing beneath the Sentinel authorization panel. No, he said quietly. He thinks we want to win. That is the misunderstanding. He turned toward the command crew, his voice steady and almost gentle. Begin final verification. Confirm every civilian flight path is clear. Notify rescue teams to stand by. And if there is still any chance they choose to leave, I want that chance waiting for them until the very last second. No one counted down. No dramatic voice announced the moment. The command deck remained almost unervingly ordinary. Admiral Nathan Brooks looked across the room one final time, making eye contact with every department chief before speaking. Engineering. Sentinel is stable. Navigation. Firing solution confirmed. Safe trajectory verified. Rescue command. Civilian routes remain clear. Emergency response groups are standing by. Nathan nodded once. Good. Dr. Olivia Carter stepped beside the primary console, her hands resting on its edge. She had spent years trying to prevent this exact moment. Now all she could do was make sure it happened as safely as possible. Nathan, she said quietly, the system is holding exactly where we predicted. If we fire now, the beam will pass approximately 68,000 miles beyond the Dominion formation before continuing toward empty space. Nathan looked at her. Your confidence level? She hesitated. 98%. And the other two? Olivia lowered her eyes for a second. Physics always keeps a small percentage for surprises. Across the bridge, Daniel Hayes swallowed hard as another communication arrived from the Dominion fleet. Grand Marshal Kalen Dravik had sent only one sentence. We are continuing as planned. Nathan read the message without any visible emotion. Archive it. Daniel blinked. Sir, history deserves complete records. The room fell silent again. Nathan slowly placed his authorization card against the console. A soft tone confirmed his identity. Another officer inserted a second authorization key, then a third. Sentinel had never been designed for one person to control. Every safeguard reflected humanity's greatest fear that someday one frightened individual might make a terrible decision alone. Nathan looked toward Olivia. She gave a reluctant nod. All interlocks cleared. Very well. Nathan drew one slow breath. Fire one controlled warning discharge. There was no explosion. No brilliant flash that filled the bridge. For nearly 3 full seconds, nothing appeared to happen at all. Daniel frowned at his sensor display. Telemetry confirms release. A thin white line finally appeared on the tactical projection, almost delicate against the darkness of space. One Dominion officer watching remotely laughed loud enough for every open channel to capture it. That is their secret weapon? Another voice joked. It looks like a navigation laser. Even Grand Marshal Dravik smiled. Record everything, he said. The Academy instructors will enjoy this lesson. On the Terran bridge, nobody answered. Olivia watched the telemetry stream faster than she could read it. Velocity is impossible. Her fingers flew across the console. The energy profile is still increasing. Nathan turned toward her. Increasing? That should not be happening. Every scientist nearby immediately began checking independent instruments. None of the numbers matched their expectations. The beam remained perfectly stable, but instead of gradually dispersing, it continued gathering coherence as it traveled farther from Earth. Olivia whispered almost to herself, "That violates our entire decay model." Nearly 30 seconds passed. Then long-range sensors detected contact. Not with the Dominion fleet. Far beyond them drifted an uninhabited rocky moon orbiting a frozen gas giant, a body selected precisely because nothing lived anywhere near it. Daniel stared at the incoming data. Impact confirmed. Everyone waited. The moon remained exactly where it had always been. One Dominion officer laughed again. Was that supposed to impress us? Another burst of laughter echoed across their bridge. Then Commander Soren Vale suddenly stopped smiling. Grand Marshal. Dravik looked toward the main display. A faint line had appeared across the moon's surface. It slowly widened, glowing with pale silver light that spread from horizon to horizon. Olivia's face lost all color. "Nathan," she whispered. "That is not possible." The moon did not explode. It simply seemed to lose the invisible balance that had held it together for billions of years. Enormous sections drifted silently apart, as if gravity itself had quietly stepped away. Every laugh disappeared. Every open communication channel fell completely silent. Nathan never celebrated. He never smiled. He only looked at the growing stream of sensor data before speaking in the same calm voice he had used all day. Cancel every remaining firing sequence. Dispatch hazard warnings to every ship within 1 million miles. Rescue command. Prepare to assist anyone affected by the debris field. And somebody. He paused, still staring at the impossible images filling every screen. Somebody tell me exactly what we just did. Silence traveled faster than any signal ever built. Across the Dominion flagship, officers who had been smiling only moments earlier stood frozen before their consoles. Commander Soren Vale was the first to recover. His hands raced across the sensor controls before he looked back toward Grand Marshal Kalen Dravik. "I have verified the readings 3 times. Dravik did not answer. He continued staring at the tactical display where the moon had once appeared as a single stable object. Now hundreds of fragments drifted slowly through space, each following a new orbital path predicted by no simulation in the Dominion database. "Run another scan," Dravik finally said. "Already completed. Use long-range gravimetric sensors." "Completed. Military observatories?" "Confirmed." Vale swallowed. Every source matches. The bridge remained completely still. One junior officer quietly reached toward the recording controls and turned off the live commentary feed without waiting for permission. Nobody objected. There was nothing left to say. Inside the Galactic Council chamber, delegates who had spent the past hour casually discussing trade agreements now watched the same images in complete disbelief. Counselor Celine Mars slowly stood from her seat. She had spent years defending humanity's reputation for restraint, but even she looked shaken. The council chairman stared at the enormous projection hanging above the assembly floor. "That was one shot." A military advisor answered almost mechanically. "One controlled discharge according to every intercepted transmission." Another delegate spoke in little more than a whisper. They called it a warning. No one responded. For the first time in generations, the chamber that had witnessed countless political arguments became completely silent. Back aboard the Terran flagship, the atmosphere felt nothing like victory. Engineers crowded around Olivia Carter while streams of impossible telemetry filled every available display. She compared one set of numbers against another before quietly removing her glasses. "Our models were wrong." Nathan Brooks looked at her. "How wrong?" Olivia hesitated before answering. The beam did not lose energy over distance. She pointed toward the data. It borrowed energy from naturally occurring gravitational gradients. The farther it traveled, the stronger it became. Several scientists exchanged stunned looks. One elderly physicist slowly leaned back into his chair. "We accidentally built a system that improves itself after launch." Nobody celebrated that discovery. Nathan folded his arms and stared at the screen. then we never truly understood what we were holding. Daniel Hayes interrupted from the communications station. Sir, incoming transmissions. Dominion. Everyone. Nathan raised an eyebrow. Everyone. Daniel nodded. Council channels. Independent systems. Civilian observers. News agencies. They are all requesting statements. Nathan answered without hesitation. Declined every interview. Daniel blinked. Everyone. Everyone. Olivia looked at him with quiet surprise. You are not going to explain what happened? Nathan slowly shook his head. Not until we understand it ourselves. Another alert sounded. Sir, Daniel said. The Dominion fleet has stopped advancing. The main tactical display confirmed it. 18 enormous formations that had moved forward with absolute confidence for hours had suddenly become motionless. A few seconds later, another update appeared. They are changing heading. Nathan watched the icons begin turning away from the solar system. No cheers erupted on the bridge. No one applauded. He simply nodded once. Keep rescue ships on standby until every fragment's trajectory is confirmed. Olivia looked at him. You still think they might need our help? Nathan answered as if the question had an obvious answer. If debris threatens any crew, then yes. She studied him for a moment before smiling faintly. Even after all this, Nathan looked through the forward observation window toward the distant stars. Especially after all this. Somewhere beyond the retreating Dominion fleet, thousands of drifting fragments reflected sunlight across the darkness like scattered pieces of broken glass. And throughout the galaxy, one uncomfortable realization settled into every military headquarters at exactly the same time. Humanity had never been weak. Humanity had simply spent all those years trying very hard not to discover what happened when its own restraint finally reached its limit. The first classified meeting after the incident did not take place inside a military bunker. It happened in the same conference room where empty coffee cups still sat beside unfinished engineering reports, as if the past 3 weeks had never happened. The difference was the silence. Nobody argued anymore. Nobody pretended to have all the answers. Admiral Nathan Brooks entered carrying a thin paper folder instead of a digital tablet. He placed it gently on the table before taking his seat. This is every document that authorized Project Sentinel, he said. Read it again. General Michael Donovan frowned. We wrote half of it. Read it anyway. Around the table, engineers, physicists, military officers, and civilian oversight members quietly opened the files. Dr. Olivia Carter reached the final appendix first. Her eyes narrowed. This cannot be right. Nathan looked at her. What did you find? She slid the document across the table. The original design proposal never described Sentinel as a weapon. Several people immediately turned to the first page. Across the top, beneath layers of old security markings, the original project title remained untouched. Gravitational Stabilization Research Initiative. Donovan looked confused. That is impossible. Olivia slowly shook her head. No, it makes sense now. She leaned back in her chair. 32 years ago, they were trying to protect planetary colonies from unstable gravity wells near collapsing stars. They wanted a way to reinforce local space, not damage it. Nathan quietly listened. Olivia continued. Every prototype failed because the stabilization field kept amplifying instead of balancing. The research was classified, transferred, redesigned, and eventually someone realized the amplification effect could become a deterrent if carefully controlled. One elderly scientist spoke for the first time that morning. We inherited the project without inheriting the mistakes that created it. Nathan nodded slowly. Or the warnings. The room became quiet again. Donovan rubbed his forehead. So nobody intentionally built a system capable of that? Olivia answered immediately. No. She looked genuinely unsettled. The original researchers abandoned the project because they believed the amplification effect made it too unpredictable for practical use. They never imagined anyone would eventually solve the containment problem. Nathan stared through the conference room window toward Earth hanging quietly beyond the lunar horizon. Then the people who created Sentinel made the right decision. Donovan looked at him with surprise. You still think they were right to stop? Nathan did not hesitate. Absolutely. Olivia slowly closed the folder. If we had understood its full capability from the beginning, somebody would have tried to build an even larger version. Nobody argued with that. Daniel Hayes entered carrying a stack of printed diplomatic messages. Sir, These arrived from the council. Nathan accepted the papers without reading them. Summarize. Emergency requests for technical briefings. Offers for scientific cooperation. Requests to inspect Sentinel. Several proposals asking Earth to place the system under joint galactic supervision. Donovan laughed once, but there was no humor in it. Yesterday, they thought we were bluffing. Today, they want shared ownership. Nathan quietly placed the papers back on the table. Decline every request. Daniel nodded. Should I give a reason? Nathan thought for several seconds before answering. Yes. Daniel waited with his notebook ready. Nathan spoke carefully, choosing every word. Tell them humanity is conducting its own investigation. Tell them we do not yet trust ourselves with this technology. Until we understand it completely, nobody else should have access to it either. Olivia looked at him for a long moment before giving the smallest approving smile. Outside the station window, maintenance crews continued repairing ordinary cargo docks, while supply shuttles carried families between lunar settlements exactly as they had every day before the crisis. Life had returned to normal for millions of people who would never know how close history had come to taking a very different path, and Nathan silently hoped they would never have a reason to learn what Sentinel was truly capable of becoming. By the end of the week, the Dominion fleet had completely withdrawn beyond the outer navigation corridors. There were no victory parades on Earth. No speeches declaring the beginning of a new age. Morning traffic still filled the highways outside Denver. Children still hurried into schools across Boston and Seattle. Coffee shops still complained about running out of fresh pastries before 8 o'clock. To ordinary people, life looked almost exactly the same. Only those responsible for protecting that ordinary life understood how much had quietly changed. Inside the Galactic Council chamber, however, nothing felt familiar anymore. Delegates who once spoke over one another now waited patiently before asking even the simplest questions. Every military proposal was reviewed twice. Every navigation dispute ended with someone asking a single uncomfortable question. How close is this to Sol? Counselor Celine Mar noticed the difference immediately. Fear had not made the galaxy more aggressive. It had made everyone unexpectedly careful. Grand Marshal Kalen Dravik entered the chamber without the confidence that had once followed him everywhere. His uniform remained perfectly pressed, but his expression had aged years in only a few days. As he approached the central podium, dozens of delegates quietly watched him. No one mocked him. No one needed to. The lesson had already been written across every military academy in known space. The council chairman cleared his throat. Has the Dominion submitted its revised border proposal? Dravik nodded once. Yes. Does the Dominion still request administrative authority over the Sol system? No. The answer echoed through the chamber. Several delegates exchanged surprised glances. Dravik continued before anyone could speak. We recommend recognizing the solar system as a permanently neutral security region. No military fleet larger than standard diplomatic escort size should enter without formal invitation. One delegate blinked. You are proposing restrictions on yourselves? Dravik answered without hesitation. On everyone. Hundreds of miles beneath the surface of the moon, Admiral Nathan Brooks sat alone reviewing the same proposal that had just arrived through diplomatic channels. Daniel Hayes stepped into the office carrying another folder. Sir, there is more. Nathan smiled faintly. There always is. Daniel handed him the report. Multiple governments have announced similar policies. Independent shipping guilds are voluntarily rerouting military traffic farther away from our outer defensive perimeter. Insurance companies have rewritten navigation contracts overnight. Nathan looked up with quiet surprise. Insurance companies moved faster than politicians? Daniel laughed. Apparently survival is good for business. Even Nathan smiled at that. A few minutes later, Olivia Carter entered carrying fresh telemetry reports. We finished tracking every fragment. Nathan accepted the file. Any unexpected hazards? None. She paused before adding. The rescue ships never had to deploy. Nathan slowly closed the report. Good. Olivia looked around the quiet office. Have you noticed something? What? Nobody is asked to celebrate. Nathan leaned back in his chair. Because this was never something to celebrate. She nodded. I think the galaxy finally understands that. Nathan walked toward the observation window overlooking the Earth hanging peacefully below. City lights slowly appeared across the night side, while weather systems drifted over entire continents with complete indifference to politics, fleets, and councils. After several minutes, Olivia quietly asked, "Do you think they are afraid of us now?" Nathan never took his eyes off the planet below. "I hope not." She looked surprised. "After everything that happened?" Nathan answered softly, "Fear never lasts. Understanding does." Somewhere far beyond the orbit of Pluto, the last Dominion patrol quietly adjusted its course to give the solar system several million extra miles of distance, not because anyone had demanded it, but because nobody in the galaxy wanted to be remembered as the civilization that ignored humanity's first warning and accidentally gave them a reason to consider a second. 6 months later, the place where the moon had once drifted through silent space was marked only by a constellation of tiny navigation beacons and a simple memorial station. It was not a military monument. There were no captured enemy banners, no statues of soldiers, no celebration of victory. The plaque mounted beside the observation window carried only one sentence. "In memory of the day restraint proved stronger than ambition." Admiral Nathan Brooks stood alone in front of the glass, a steaming paper cup of coffee warming his hands. Beyond the transparent shield, thousands of harmless fragments continued their slow journey through space, each carefully tracked to ensure they would never threaten another traveler. Behind him, the station remained busy with ordinary life. Maintenance crews argued over repair schedules. Cargo pilots complained about delayed docking assignments. Someone laughed somewhere down the corridor. It reminded Nathan why all of it had mattered. Olivia Carter stepped quietly into the observation deck, carrying a small cardboard box. "I thought you would be here," she said. Nathan smiled without turning around. "You always know where to find me." She placed the box on a nearby bench. The engineering team finished dismantling the primary Sentinel control core this morning. Nathan looked at her. "Completely." She nodded. "Every critical component has been separated and stored in different locations. No single government, no single military branch, no single scientist can ever activate it alone again." Nathan slowly released a breath he did not realize he had been holding. "Good." Olivia leaned beside him, watching the quiet stars beyond the glass. "Do you ever wonder what history will say about us?" Nathan thought for a long moment before answering. "History usually remembers the loudest moments." He smiled faintly. "Real life is rarely that simple." She waited. "Then what do you hope people remember?" Nathan looked toward Earth, shining peacefully in the distance like a blue marble floating in endless darkness. "That we never wanted to become the strongest civilization in the galaxy." He paused. "We only wanted to make sure ordinary families could wake up tomorrow morning without worrying about who might arrive from the stars." Olivia followed his gaze. "Do you think future generations will understand?" Nathan chuckled softly. "Probably not." "Does that bother you?" He shook his head. "Not at all. If they grow up believing peace was normal, then we did our job." A quiet tone sounded from Nathan's wrist communicator. Daniel Hayes' familiar voice came through. "Sir, the Council has officially ratified the Sole Neutral Zone Treaty." The vote was unanimous. Nathan smiled to himself. "Thank you, Daniel. There is one more thing." "Go ahead." "The final report says there has not been a single unauthorized military approach toward Earth since that day." Nathan looked once more toward the empty place where the moon had once been. "I hope there never is." The communication ended, leaving only the quiet hum of the station around them. Olivia picked up her box and started toward the exit before stopping at the doorway. "Coming." Nathan took one last sip of now lukewarm coffee before setting the empty cup into a recycling bin. "Yes." He followed her into the hallway where engineers, mechanics, pilots, and families passed one another without recognizing the man who had changed the course of galactic history. Nathan preferred it that way, because in the end, the greatest measure of strength was never the ability to force others into silence. It was earning a future where children could laugh without ever needing to know how close the adults came to losing that ordinary sound forever. And perhaps that is why the galaxy eventually stopped telling the story of the shot that changed the stars and started telling a far more important one about the people who possessed unimaginable power, understood its terrible cost, and chose every single day to leave it unused.